This video is brought to you by the Army Painter. Hello my friends, welcome back to the channel. Do you want to add some cool graphics and details to your models but find that freehanding is just too intimidating? Then do I have the video for you. I'm Keewa, your resident painting person. Let me introduce you to the cool world of decals, also known as transfers. To use a decal, first we need to prepare the surface to make it more even, thereby making it easier for the decal to settle and attach properly. One of the ways we can do that is through the use of a coat of gloss varnish. You could do this with a spray can if you want, but I used an airbrush to control it a bit better. Once that's dry and smooth, get your transfer sheet and using either scissors or a sharp knife, cut out the transfer that you want to use. Plop it down on your desktop and wet it with some drops of water. I use a squeezy bottle for this, but you could also use water loaded onto a paintbrush. You could put it on a piece of tissue if you wanted, but it's only water after all. Give it a moment to soak through, then carefully pick up the paper with the decal still on it. Position it next to the part you want to decorate and, using a soft paintbrush, slide the decal from the paper onto the model. You could, if you feel particularly feisty and the decal is small enough, lift it onto the brush and transfer it onto the model that way, but be warned, if the decal is big enough it might fold around and stick to itself. Now I'm not saying it's impossible to unfold a decal that's gone like this, but as you struggle to do it, the chance of decal tearing goes up dramatically. More on that later. With your decal on the model, you can nudge it here and there with a brush to get it where you want it. It goes without saying that you shouldn't use anything hard or sharp for this. If you do, you're absolutely going to tear your decal and make it useless, and probably scratch your paint in the process. After a long time of nudging it back and forth, up and down to try and get it just so, hopefully you succeed and can move on. Get a dry brush, a brush that is dry, not a dry brush, and wick away the excess moisture so the decal doesn't start to move around. If your surface is flat, once it's stuck down and you're certain you won't want to move it, put a coat of gloss varnish over the top. Be very gentle so as to not shift the decal as you do this varnishing. The edges of the film should disappear into the gloss varnish sandwich, and then you can add a coat of matte varnish or whatever finish you want over the top of that. If your surface is not flat, you might need to use something called a decal softener to melt the film away, leaving only the design on the surface. A decal softener will also make the decal sink into the crevices and around other details, so it's perfect if you want to apply decal on a very textured surface. Of course, as with everything in the world we live in, there are decal setting products available, but if you're a DIY kind of person, you can use an old scale modeler's trick to make your own solution. Try a mix of 1:1 white vinegar and warm water and carefully dab it onto the decal. Make sure you use household white vinegar, the kind you would use for cleaning. If you use brown malt or balsamic vinegar, well, that brown colour is not going to go away when it dries, so you're going to leave some pretty horrendous brown splodges on your model. I know a guy who tried this with malt vinegar some years ago on an Imperial night. It did not go well, so white vinegar only, if you please. Make absolutely sure that your decal is where you want it to be before you do this. There really is no going back once the film has begun to melt. Do not touch it until it's finished. If you nudge it, brush into it, whatever, it will tear like cheap underpants and you'll have to carefully scrape it off and try again with a fresh decal. Leave it for about 2 hours to make sure the film is fully melted before continuing.
2 hours later.
Once it's fully dry, you can varnish it no problem and get that cool painted on look. So that's the method, but there are a few more things to talk about when it comes to decals. Old decal sheets. Decal paper typically only has a shelf life of a few years, and unless they're stored in perfect condition, i.e. a shrink wrap box, your older decal sheets will probably degrade and start to crumple and crumble. Once these foaming crumple lines reach the design, when it's dampened, the decal will simply disintegrate. Sometimes, despite your best efforts, you'll tear a decal as you try to work with it. It happens to the best of us. If the tear is minor or simple, say a large decal is torn into 2 or 3 pieces, you can nudge the decal around until the line is invisible and no one will be any the wiser. Put your decals on once the model is painted, but before you do your final weathering and shading. Perhaps this goes without saying, but in order to tie your decal into your model, you have to weather it along with the rest of your model. Nothing looks stranger than a battle-scarred weathered Space Marine tank with pristine decals sitting just on top of the dirt. You can stack decals on top of one another to create a different, more complicated design. Not really much of a trick, but it does look cool. Sometimes, if you're putting a decal onto a surface that isn't flat and bends in 2 directions, Space Marine shoulder pads, you might need to make some teeny tiny incisions onto the decal film before you set it in order to make it lie flat. This is a monumental pain in the arse, so I hope that you don't have to do it. This is just my experience, but if you change your mind once you've dampened and lifted a design off the paper, you can simply put it back on the paper no problem and use it again another time. The film sits on the backing paper and the water loosens the glue, but again, in my experience, the glue remaining on the back of the decal is usually enough to stick it back onto the paper to try again another time. And there you have it, putting cool designs on your models without having to freehand complicated designs through the power of decals. For other hobby how-tos, tactics, lore and more, pay us a visit at goonhammer.com, like and subscribe here on YouTube, and consider supporting us on Patreon. I've been Keewa, thank you for watching.